I'm Stephen Perry, and I'm one of those, along with Chris Sunderland and one or two others, who've taken this initiative of setting up Independence for Bristol. And we're delighted to see you here tonight. We didn't know how many people would come. We had absolutely no means of knowing. And it's rather thrilling to see us with such difficulties at the back, even though it's rather inconvenient for you there at the back trying to sort yourselves out. But we'll start. I'm sure what I'm about to say will be repeated in the course of the evening. But we set up Independence for Bristol as an umbrella for independent candidates to be councillors in Bristol City Council. By an umbrella we mean something that can provide the framework, because in the past it's all been almost impossible, if not impossible actually, for independents in Bristol to get elected at all. How do you grab the attention? How do you get noticed? And so we plan to change that. And what we want under our umbrella is people who come from the community, who are of the community, with a record of doing work in the community, who can stand as independent councillors in wards in which they themselves have worked or are known or have lived. And for those people who share the aspirations we have, not the party political views, because we are looking for a very diverse group of people, but people who share what are known as the Bell Principles, which were set up by Martin Bell, Lord Nolan, and what have you, about integrity and so on. And that will be covered, I think, in some detail later in this meeting. Those people who share those standards, we hope to be able to adopt, select, call it what you like, I even use the word anoint, as people to come under Independence for Bristol. Why? Because it then gives the public some kind of quality assurance, a quality mark, you might call it, of who they are and what kind of people they are. And once those candidates are in place, then this umbrella organisation can help provide them with leaflets, handle media and publicity, and maybe provide some funding as well, depending on our capabilities at raising money. But what we're not is a political party, in the sense that there will be no whips if any of the councillors if any candidates gain election. There'll be no manifesto, and there won't be any leadership structure in the council house, in City Hall, I should say. Then why are we doing this now? Well, the reason is we think the time is right. The time has come for Bristol when this can happen. Why? Well, because last May, this city bucked the trend and voted to have an elected mayor. In November, it voted for an independent mayor. In December, Labour decided, or had it decided for them nationally, that they wouldn't join the new mayor's cabinet. Political parties, there's a lot of evidence to support this, political parties are more out of favour than perhaps at any time in our recorded, in the sense that there were surveys that you could look at, in our recorded history politically. They're weak. The public, arguably, are tired of party politicians, and particularly, perhaps so, in local government. Now, Bristol's very unusual, and I think there's an opportunity here as well, because it's one of a minority of towns and cities where there are no independent candidates whatsoever. In Gloucestershire, there are 3. In Bath, there are 2. North Somerset, 7. West Somerset, 7. Wiltshire, 10. Cornwall, 37. And so on. There are many independent councillors all over the country, and we have not one. And that cannot go on. And when you ally to the fact that the role of the councillor now has changed, we now have an elected mayor who has immense powers, relatively speaking, the kind of strategic powers. Decisions over policies are not going to be made by parties anymore in quite the same way. But the intention, as we understand it, is that the role of the councillor in championing and representing their ward is to be beefed up, strengthened, and that the need for councillors to be able to represent their wards will be stronger than it ever was. And if you ally to that the fact that there will be more money thrown probably to the neighbourhood partnerships for them to spend to direct to their own wards, you can see we are now in different times. And I think the number of you here also help reflect that. Arguably, our independent mayor knocked down the door and renamed this building City Hall. Now, I think it's time for us all to walk in. So really what we want to do tonight is ask you, who's willing to put themselves forward as a candidate? Who's willing to take part in a selection panel? And who's willing to do volunteering to help us get those candidates elected? Are you in? Because that's what we'll be asking you tonight. Now, I'm delighted to have to my right here Pippa Goldfinger and Mel Usher. Now, those names may or may not mean something to you, but I remember in 2011 learning what happened in the small town of Somerset, Frome. I'm sure most of you know it, where there was something of a political earthquake. And it's that political earthquake that, above all, has been an influence on us in setting up Independence for Bristol. Because what they did is they set up Independence for Frome. And I'm going to invite them to tell their story. First of all, I wonder if I could just introduce Pippa Goldfinger to you. Pippa, if you just stand up. And Mel Usher, if I could invite you as the leader of Independence for Frome, just to tell us very briefly, if you would, the extraordinary story of what you achieved in Frome 2 years ago. Okay.
If I'd known the BBC were here, I would have had a shave. This is incredibly spooky for me, because we called a meeting in January in 2011, thinking, well, there might be 10 people arrived. And so we hired a room that would take 40, being optimistic sort of guy, and 86 people turned up. So they were hanging out of the windows in just the same way as you are now. And I think that shows how much interest there is in politics. And perhaps the public are not disinterested in politics, perhaps traditional politicians are disinterested in the public. And that's something that we might want to remember. What I can't capture tonight is the explosion of interest, the excitement, the buzz that went around the town, which is obviously smaller than Bristol, but just because something different had happened. And people felt for once that they were in control of what was going on. And we started off with just 5 people in a pub, being disgruntled, and finally, after several weeks' discussion, one of us saying, well, why don't we do something about it, in the way that you just heard. And actually, we did. And we started off in January, and we were elected in May. We won 10 out of the 17 seats. To be honest, if we'd been a bit smarter, we would have won all 17. What we didn't do, it was interesting, if you track back through our records, the people who didn't live in the communities where they were standing for election didn't win. So that's an important point. So where we had to import somebody into areas where there wasn't somebody naturally to stand, then it didn't work. But what was probably most significant for us was there was a 75% increase in turnout. Just think of that figure, 75% increase in turnout. People were really excited about the possibilities of what could happen here. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer. We are effectively a town council, although town councils have more significant powers nowadays than they ever used to have. You're a big city, with major problems. One of the things that we said to each other was, well, if we bugger it up, it doesn't really matter. Nobody's going to die. Unfortunately, you're a unitary, and so therefore there's a more serious side to what you're doing, and actually you need to take that into account. But I think it's important. So just some pointers from us, and I've got about 6 or 7 minutes left. Track record for independent groups. I suppose I should actually own up that I do have a history in local government. And many years ago, I was a chief executive of a local authority. I did start something which was a national body for improving local government across the country. Although this is the first time I've ever been elected since my flirtation days with Militant when I was 18. But it's kind of interesting to see it from the other end of the telescope, you know. How do people judge councillors and people who are elected? And usually, in the first instance, very poorly indeed. You do feel about that big, because most of the public out there actually have very little time for most elected members, or have done in the past. But independent groups and their track record are not good. You need to know that. Up and down the country, what usually happens is that people stand quite often on a single issue. Well, they're going to close our hospital. They stand as closet Tories, but they don't want to stand as Conservatives and be known as Conservatives. Or they stand as taxpayers' alliances, because we need to keep the council tax down. And generally, what happens within months is that they start arguing with one another. And very rarely do they actually see out a full term in a way that you would want them to. We made it very, very plain at the beginning that we were what I call watermelons. We're green on the outside and red in the middle. So this is the fourth element to add to that kind of independent group, that we actually came from that political spectrum. And people needed to understand that. Selection of candidates was key for us. What we said was, just like in this meeting, tell us if you want to be a candidate. We then had an objective group of people who did not want to stand, that were a diverse group, because I think that's an important issue that we need to bear in mind. And they were the ones that selected the candidates, and not me. And actually, I went through the same process as well. And each one of us who wanted to stand had to put a maximum of 2 pages down in terms of what did they want to achieve for Frome, or it could be Bristol, and what were their views, just some of their views on the world. How did they see the world? And actually what we were after there is not necessarily people who were coming from that kind of left of centre, but actually people who were rational, who were capable of changing their minds, who would be persuaded by the power of debate. Oh God, I mean, how often does that happen in a political circle? And who weren't too dogmatic. And also, we made it quite plain to the electorate that they should, if they were happy with the status quo, they shouldn't vote for us. And actually what we were going to do is we were going to change things. Now, I can say it here, we were quite woolly in terms of what we were going to change from to what, because who knows. And actually, that was a real strength, because people wanted to contribute to that. They wanted to be part of that debate. So there was no manifesto as such, other than we don't like what we currently see, and we'd like to see something else. And I guess that the past wasn't going to be an indicator of the future. We also recognised, and again this will be important for you, that if you're going to form a group, not a political party, then you needed something that was going to hold you together. And as Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. So we worked really hard in terms of understanding one another's emotional and intellectual needs and requirements. So we went through a lot of facilitated events, a lot of discussions amongst each other in terms of where we're at. Because the one thing we wanted to avoid was actually ending 4 years actually hating each other. You know, and my experience, and I probably worked or been in over 200 local authorities across the country, is that actually most politicians don't like each other. How many of you have been politicians previously? Yeah. Just a couple. Well, you'll understand what I mean. And actually, they won't mind me saying it now, but the Lib Dem group in Frome, they don't even like to be in the same room together. Never mind make decisions from the same kind of consensus. And we said right from the beginning that will not happen to us. We will be different people at the end of it, but we will want to make a contribution that isn't based upon putting other people down. So, when we meet, and we meet quite often, we never decide anything about reports. We never actually have in front of us a list of things that need to be done. There is no whip. We discuss what might be achievable in terms of where do we want to be. And we don't go back over the nuts and bolts of how the council is run, who's putting what reports where. No one has ever told any one of our members what to do. and I have twice voted against the rest of the independent group, and no one has suggested that I should resign as a result of that. Now, what would happen in a normal council is, you know, the world would come down on my head, and we would have to make some changes. On election techniques, well, it's hard work, because there's no party machine, so there's no history, so you have to start making it up. You have to register as a small party, you presumably know this, to actually have a logo. And a logo on the election ballot, and that's what people recognise. So you do have to register as a small party, and I think that, I can't remember, but that cost about 75 quid, something like that. But it's important that you know that. We never ever mentioned the opposition or the people who'd run the council previously in a critical way throughout our whole campaign. We were relentlessly upbeat in terms of it's about us and you, meaning our citizens and the public, and not about them, meaning other politicians. And that is an absolutely crucial point for us, and we've lived our way all the way through the last couple of years on that basis. We will not criticise other people. We will only say this is what we intend to do, and we will make the agenda our agenda, not their agenda. And part of the reason is that's all politics. All of that yaboo such stuff, all the stuff you hear in Parliament, is what really pisses people off. Yeah? So we will not indulge in that at all. Look, it's tempting. It really is tempting. Yeah? But you don't want to do it. Yeah? So we didn't. We also ran some very unusual campaigns. We had flash mobs in supermarkets. We also had posters. It didn't look like any election poster that you've ever seen. We had a much better logo than you, because ours was "If Independence for Frome," which we could then say, if not now, when, if only. We played on that again relentlessly, and actually people enjoyed it, because what was the next thing we were going to come out with? And it was fun. And how often have people said that this election was fun? And it worked for us. We thought, when we were elected, that we would be welcomed with open arms. We weren't. It was really bad. The traditional politicians and parties did not like this. And we pissed on their chips. And for some people, and not in a town council environment, for some people it's actually a loss of income as well. So it was a really difficult thing, and they have never ever forgiven us, and they will not work with us in a way that we wanted. We just assumed, well, here we are. We were a group of citizens. None of us had been elected previously, or one had. We've got some excitement, some interest here. Big turnouts. Let's sit round the table and make something happen. It didn't happen. It didn't happen, and I don't anticipate that it will in the future. This is a long-standing scar that some people have got, and actually, you might find it's the same with the officers as well. The officers in a grand building like this, and I have done some work here. They quite like the political environment. It gives them some certainty. Yeah? I mean, this is the best sense. They're bureaucrats. They want certainty, they want decisions, they want logic. And actually, one of the things that you'll be bringing is the opposite of that. You'll be bringing a new kind of approach, a new way of thinking. You'll be able to knock down some of those shibboleths. You'll be able to ask those questions. And one of the great techniques is to keep asking why. And actually, if you keep asking why did that happen? When you get an answer, why did that occur in the way that it did? They never get past the fourth why, because actually the thing falls apart. So you've got to keep asking those questions, and it might mean it's a very difficult time for the officers, but that's the way it should be, and I guess they're probably already feeling that with an independent mayor. So no one has ever said to us, how can we help you out? You're doing a good job, so don't expect that. Those of you who want to stand, you might get something from the local population, but you will not get anything from the institutions in Bristol. Yeah? And some parts of local government actually can't cope with this kind of new approach. It seems to me that the core business of local authorities is solving problems, not just delivering services. And providing services is only one aspect of an innovative and at times risky problem-solving approach. And to do that, you've got to engage citizens effectively. Most politicians are constrained by the fact they want to get re-elected. So that already puts a straitjacket on, whether they're from the Labour Party, the Conservatives, or the Lib Dems, or others. They want to get re-elected. And we said very clearly from the beginning, this is very clearly probably, this is going to be a one-term shot for us. Now it might be there's another group of people who will come along afterwards, but this is a one-term shot, and it's very important that we make things happen quickly as a result of that. We keep people focused on what we can do now, and we actually don't lose our nerve in terms of whether you're going to be re-elected, because that actually is what drives many traditional politicians. If I do this, then this will be the end result. And actually, in saying that, they're already disrespecting most citizens. People understand why you make decisions, and we have apologised on several occasions because we've got it wrong. And again, how often do you hear that? You're able to do that because there is no party machine behind you. You actually say, yeah, I hold the hands up, we buggered this up. And actually there are lots of aspects which are not so dangerous that you can make those kind of decisions on. And actually we want to give away power, which is a very unusual aspect of politics as well. We actually want to work with others. We call it more for more. So actually working with organisations in the town and giving them the possibility of doing things rather than us. And finally, the media love independence, because actually just look at the turnout tonight. They like independence, partly because you can say the kind of things that they want to hear, which is in plain terms and not in some kind of local government bureaucratic speak. But also, it's kind of fetching, it's, and people can understand it out there. So, we've managed to generate interest right across some of the nationals, just in the very small way that we've done things. If you did it, that would be more significant.
Thank you.
Well, what a story. Thanks very much for coming. My goodness. My name is Chris Sunderland, and my journey into this, I suppose, began back in 2001, trying to think about the democracy of the city in Bristol Democracy Commission. It was then that we proposed that there should be an elected mayor. The people in power at the time didn't even print our report because they didn't like it. And at that time, the group of us that were meeting around that could see the potential for a new political culture, could see what independent councillors could do. And I believe just now, in Bristol, we might be on the verge of a sea change in our political culture. This might be the moment, and you might be the people who can help to make something really significant change in the governance of the city.
Excuse me, could you speak up?
Yes, sure, yes.
There's quite a lot of noise coming from the
Okay, thank you for saying that. I will. What I propose to do now is to talk you gently through this document that you should have been given as you came in, because we would like tonight to consult you on every phrase of this document. So we would like to know how you feel. And you, as we talk, you can, in the right-hand column, either put a tick to say you like that phrase, you're supportive of it, a question mark to say you're not sure, or a cross to say this is not a good idea in my view. If you haven't got a piece of paper, raise your hand, please. If you need a pen, raise your hand as well. Jason, you can just take a look at that, pass them round. Thank you. So, and we also want to hear from you, if you like, verbally, your questions and also your comments, and particularly to the folk from Independence for Frome who've come and delighted us this evening. I hope you sensed the sort of refreshingness of their approach. I would love to see this worked out on a city scale. I think there is real potential in this city at this moment to do it. You've heard what we're about, a new form of political association based on the enthusiasm of ordinary people. It's time we stop defining one another by party political labels. It's time that those who are enthusiastic and care for this city and have something to offer can just offer that as who they are and not have to take on board some party political label which is going to constrain them and curtail so much of their freedom. So that's what we're about. It says we're about an association that exists to promote the recruitment and election of independent councillors, which sounds boring, but I actually think that behind that is the potential for a new movement in the city of people who are looking for a fresh approach to politics, where it's not just the independent councillors who stand that are important, but all those who stand behind them and for a new political culture are helping to make that happen. I think, as in Frome, the thing that will unite the independent councillors of Independence for Bristol is that they are for Bristol. That's what it's about. So it's not about a party political label, it's simply for the city. And it's around that, the good, the well-being of the city, and I would argue later, the long-term well-being of the city, that they are working. So this is not just a short-term political culture, but it's actually the long-term well-being of the city. So the good of the city will be the centre of the life. Now I'm going to just invite you to make to hear a few comments from around the room. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Just so we can get a sense of the group. Who would like to begin that process? And ask questions, if you'd like to, of our friends from Independent for Frome, etc. We cannot hear without microphones, so just speak loudly. Yes.
As an independent, standing as Independents for Bristol, how do you ensure that you don't become a political party in your own right or influenced by a political party?
Because we have a framework document which everybody commits to, part of which is to say we will not accept a party whip. We are people for ourselves, for our city, for our neighbourhoods, but we are not going to band together in the party political manner. That's the centre of it. So in that sense, it will never be a conventional political party.
Hi, I'm wondering, I'm sure lots of people are as well, what George Ferguson, what the Mayor's involvement is in this. This question's going to come up, so I just thought...
Yeah, that's fine.
Is he going to be some sort of de facto leader? Because I know a lot of people wouldn't be happy if that were the case.
Yeah, the answer is no to that. George is not here. I mean, I think there are many people who might be sympathetic to what George has done and appreciative of what George has done, but this is a movement independently. And as I said, for me personally, it goes back to 2001. I personally... it's actually, Independence for Bristol has come from several minds, if you see what I mean. But for me, at least 6 months ago, I had the idea that this would be a good thing to do, and even booked the domain name. And Robin Markwell from the BBC phoned me up about 2 weeks ago and said, "So what are you going to do with this domain name?" And I said, "I'm not sure, but this might be the right time." And I think it is the right time. And I've met loads of other people who are seriously interested in this. So I think many people involved in Independence for Bristol might be encouraged that we have an elected mayor, but Independence for Bristol would be needed whoever the mayor was. We think there's room for a new political culture in the city. There's room for independents behaving in a new way, as Mel and Pippa have experienced in Frome. And we think that will change the political culture, whoever is actually the particular personality of the mayor. And I would look for members of Independence for Bristol to challenge the mayor as well as support the mayor. So no, it's not George's party, and it never will be. Steve?
There was mention of the phrase watermelon, which I think is a great phrase. I've been through it before, actually. But presumably, the politics of the people who are standing would be irrelevant to the group. Is that right?
That's a really interesting question. What we're suggesting, I mean, if you like, working this out in the context of a city which has a mayor is a new thing from what they've done in Frome. And there they were elected, and they had 10 out of 17 seats. They had to put a programme together, and they did that in a really interesting way. We don't anticipate independence for Bristol behaving in quite that way. We're really interested in recruiting people with a broad range of interests who are for the city. And how they behave as a group, it, to some extent, is just a big question mark for us, if they behave as a group at all. We see I think that the focus of political activity for the councillor in a city with an elected mayor as shifting towards the ward, the neighbourhood, the community, as encouraging grassroots political engagement, encouraging people, ordinary people, to take, to become, as the phrase, creators and producers of our common future. Instead of the passiveness that we all experience as being members of a consumer society, with the disaffection and the depression that can go with that, I think we can become creators and producers of our future. We can become agents. We can become people who actually can begin to shape. I mean, you, like Steve, have been, myself, Steve, many others here have been part of lots of dreaming exercises over the last few years, lots of envisioning exercises about what the city could be like. And I found those really encouraging. But one thing I felt at the end of them was the frustration of, so who's going to put this into action? Who's going to actually do that? Where is the strategy to make this happen? Now, I think that might arise from here.
Sorry, Chris, you didn't quite answer the question. So, is there going to be the politics of the people who are standing for independence of Bristol would be spread right across the spectrum, as far as you would? Would that be
Well,
okay?
it's really interesting that we define the spectrum as the spectrum of party politics. Why is that the way we think about everybody? Why don't we see people as standing for themselves, for their own imagination, for their wards, for their people around them, for the city? Let's reimagine these spectra. You might say, this person, people might try to pigeonhole members of Independence of Bristol and say this person's more right-wing than that person, but let's resist those labels. Let's be people.
Just a point there. I did describe us as watermelons, it's quite right, but actually it's not a full, not all of us are totally subscribed to that fruit. Or is it vegetable? Anyway, and actually what's happened is that people's attitudes and views have shifted. So there is certainly one of us who wouldn't mind me saying it, who's a kind of slightly right of centre. But actually it's been very, very interesting watching him dealing with some of the others and them dealing with him. And actually everybody has shifted as a result of it. Not necessarily together, but kind of in odd angles and odd ways. And it's that respect for each other's views which is absolutely crucial. I think we were possibly slightly different. Our process was a little bit more in terms of let's see if we can try and get a left of centre group. But what we were really, really interested in is kind of weeding out some of those people who have been around for quite a long time and wanted to play the old kind of politics and saw this as a route to do it. That was more important to us.
Okay.
With that in mind, why not change the wording of the fifth band here where it says to create a new set of politicians and say to create a new set of representatives?
Yeah, good idea. Which is all to say, could you write that down in your form, and I can already hear support for that idea. Thank you very much.
So I was just interested to know how successful the councillors in Frome were, the independent councillors were, in getting on committees, whether or not they encountered any opposition.
Okay, so if you didn't hear, it was how successful are the councillors in Frome at getting on committees?
Yeah.
Pippa,
We had the
stand up, Pippa.
Sorry. We had the majority, so basically we abolished all the existing committees and recreated them. And then we just had, two main committees, internal affairs, external affairs. And then we set up working groups, so we invited people from the communities who might have a specialism or a special interest, more knowledge than us, because all we are is people who've managed to get elected as councillors. There's going to be people in Frome who know way more about certain things than us. We've got a very small staff because we're just town council. So yeah, we've just got 3 committees now, because we've got planning subcommittee, and then everything else is kind of working groups involving the public. So that's what we do.
Okay.
That might be something that needs to be brought on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can see that the agenda is very open here. Okay, I want to go on now because a really important question is how candidates might be chosen, and we have some on the piece of paper. I just want to skip through this. So what we're suggesting is, and I'd like your comments on the right-hand column, as I've said, tick, cross, question mark, that candidates should have 2 things. One is they should show evidence of significant experience and understanding of the ward they hope to represent. I hope that's obvious. We suggest they should already have some evidence of a following in that ward and be able to provide that evidence to us, so that you don't get the lone shark who actually represents nobody standing to be part of Independence for Bristol. Most importantly, as well, that they commit themselves to the standards. We've largely adopted the standards promoted by Martin Bell, which builds around the Nolan Committee's 7 principles of public life. These are not just moral exhortations, the Nolan principle, but they actually applied to public office. So selflessness, for example, reads, holders of public office should act solely in terms of the public interest. They should not do so in order to gain financial or other benefits for themselves, their family or their friends. So it's quite cached what selflessness means and what the others mean. Accountability is about being accountable to the proper scrutiny, etc., of a councillor. Yes?
Yeah, just clarification, please. What do you mean by evidence of significant experience? What experience?
Well,
surely living in the ward is an experience.
Well,
So I live in Barton Hill.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I know Barton Hill quite well myself and lived there.
So what evidence do you have to produce?
Yes, okay. Well, it would be up to the person. I mean, we haven't decided particularly what evidence you have to produce, but living in a place for a long time would be clearly a serious part of that. But can I go on, and then we'll see, because it's a bit about the assessment of that. So Martin Bell then tries, I think, to articulate some of the things that Mel and Pippa that is already part of this culture in Independence for Frome. We're looking for people who are non-discriminatory, who are committed to right action, ethical behaviour, and to pluralism. So we're not interested in anybody with any racist or other discriminatory ideas or policies. Okay? We're looking for creative people. You'll see the word consulting with communities constantly and innovatively, really interested in the revival of grassroots politics, of local communities getting engaged in new ways, that we must have new imagination in our neighbourhoods and the way that they work. We treat political opponents, and Mel talked about this, with courtesy and respect continually. And I'd like to say, just by the way, that nothing Independent for Bristol is saying or doing is a personal slight on any of our existing councillors who work very hard and who have often given enormous amounts of their lives and their energy to the city. What I'm always saying is we think there's a different way of working. And there's a whole bunch of people waiting in the wings who would get involved in this if there were a fresh culture. That's what we're saying. So, resist abuses of power, patronage, be open, and this is one of the Nolan principles, openness, open at every stage of decision making. Okay, if there's more than one suitable candidate for a ward, what do we do? Independence for Bristol might only have a certain amount of resources in terms of people. We wouldn't want our candidates standing against one another necessarily. So how do we do that? The ideas at the moment are that either we might, and we will be setting up an independent panel to look at candidates and consider from the perspective of the culture that we've talked about tonight, who would suit best. Another alternative, if all the candidates in that ward were interested, might be to hold a public meeting. But that could be quite painful for people to do that. So I think we'd probably look for them to want to do that, but have a public meeting where people decided who their candidate was. And I think there's precedent for that from elsewhere. So we would encourage candidates to use their own initiative and develop their own campaign, but we hope, if people back this, if we have people who will fund this, that we would be able to provide some access to finance and so to leafleting and something, and most importantly, to people to help. People to help. Because this is a movement. It's not just about a poor solitary councillor putting their head above the parapets and saying, well, maybe I'll do it. It's about us as people getting behind this and saying, this is something we want to do. This can really make change in the city. Let's do it. Yes?
Have we had any expressions of interest in finance yet, or have we got any sort of ideas of potential?
In finance? Well, I think at this point we're pretty near. I think we've got 40 quid. And I think we've spent about 100 and something hiring this horse. So actually we're in a bit of a difficult moment. But if you like the idea and you have a bank account, it would be great. So, and we'll be putting the word out, and I think there are people who would like this sort of movement. So let's see what we can do. This is a moment when we're saying, let's see what we can do.
Sorry, just on that as well.
Yep.
If this isn't a political party, or is it a political party in that when it comes to electoral expenses and that sort of thing, because I wouldn't like the idea of an independent having access to unlimited funds that aren't registered or whatever.
Can I answer that? Because the reference was made before by Mel to the fact that we would have to register with the Electoral Commission as a political party. There are very, very particular requirements, legal requirements on reporting. The reporting we would be subjected to would be identical to that of any of the existing political parties. There is simply no way that we can operate without declaring during a campaign who our donations are from, for example. No more than any other party can. Well, our position would be identical in that respect.
Okay. So we will aim to support candidates. We may have to focus on particular neighbourhoods where we think we stand a realistic chance, depending on how many resources we've got. Frome's experience was overwhelming. And new people turned out. I mean, isn't that so exciting? That new people turned out because perhaps they had some hope in the politics at last. Yes?
What kind of outlay would it take to support a candidate in a particular ward? Should that candidate want to go forward and do all the legwork themselves and have a network around them? What extra would they be looking to from sort of the centre?
Well, maybe I can help. I don't know what. There are some officers here from the council. Is Yvonne still here? But the last election, I believe, 2 years ago, that the amount you could spend would be about £1,000 during the election period. You can spend money before. You don't have to spend £1,000. And it's a question of how many leaflets. We would probably suggest getting out something like 3 leaflets in that election period, and perhaps a couple before the election period begins. So you are talking about hundreds, maybe the odd thousands of pounds, depending on the resources and your style and your ability to fund it.
Okay. And one last thing about candidates and their selection is I'm really interested in encouraging new people to stand as councillors, and also eventually Independence for Bristol providing some sort of educative mentoring function so that people who perhaps wouldn't have the confidence at the moment to do it will do in the future. I think particularly in our more disadvantaged areas it can be difficult for people to come forward. I would love to provide Independence for Bristol to provide some sort of encouragement on a long-term basis to new people to enter this sphere for the good of the city. Yes?
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent and important aim. I'm slightly disappointed that there is no reference in this document to the democratic deficit. The research that's been done that says that most councillors, the average age of a councillor is 70. They're all white men, give or take. Right. I think it's incredibly important if you've got an aspiration and a vision, not to leave diversity out of that as an aim.
I mean, that is something that we've already talked about. And I'm sure it will be shared around this room. So write it on your form, and we'll make sure we take that on board. Yeah.
Are you looking to put any candidates forward for the mayor elections?
Yes. as many as we can. No, that's why this is a good moment. Yeah.
Going back to candidates again, I mean, significant experience and understanding of their ward. To me, from my background, what that says to me is that's fine for me and that's fine for you, but for the younger generations,
Okay.
I can see, significant.
Yeah.
Have you got significant when you're 19, 20, 21?
Exactly. No, good for you. Thank you very much. So if we're going to do this true diversity agenda, we've got to make some allowance for younger people.
Absolutely,
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to move on to a last stage, which is, do you have a broad strategy? This is a tentative suggestion, really. The thought is we don't set out with particular policies of any sort, but here we have what I think are broad democratic intents. So what I've listed here, and which I'm really interested to hear if you don't like them or you think that some are more important than others. I'd like you to indicate that on your form. But take powers back from London, enable effective strategic decision making over the city region, devolve appropriate powers to neighbourhoods. These are things that are all part of what's called the localism agenda, and there's a localism act. I think we could go much further than is currently being proposed in terms of devolving appropriate powers to neighbourhoods. I'd love to see that happen, and I'd love to see, as a result of it, a new grassroots democracy where people are seriously engaged with their neighbourhoods. I think there's been a lot of talk about devolving power to neighbourhoods, but as yet there's very little fruit on the ground. And part of that would be creating more participation in politics. I think we've heard that from Frome. I think this is a key thing. If more people are turning out, more people are engaged, this must be a good thing. I wonder if we'd want to commit to having an eye to the long-term future of the city, long-term future well-being of the city. So much of party politics is so short-term. In this city, it's been dogged by these 3 out of 4 yearly elections that we've had, so that they hardly settle down to governing the city before they're thinking about the next election. This, I think, as an aim for independence for Bristol might be a worthy one, and presenting Bristol to the world, just to be aware that we are a core city, we have the potential to influence wider than ourselves. This movement, Independence for Bristol, perhaps the first time a city has taken on this sort of agenda, could it shape a future for others? Could it be that other cities will hear of this and want to do it? That could change something deeper and further. Yes, sir.
In a way, putting the long-term strategy at the end of the document seems like it's the wrong way round to me. Glancing through the document, I would get the impression that your prime objective is to get independent councillors voted onto the council. But in a way, that's a solution to another problem. And the other problem is the deficiency or ineffectiveness of democracy locally. And that doesn't really shout out at me. You've kind of said it at the end. But I think if that was a prime objective, then thinking about democratic deficit would come automatically.
Yeah,
I think that got missed out because it's kind of topsy-turvy.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm not saying one part of this is more important than the other, and it certainly adds up to, I think, a serious democratic intent.
I mean, the other thing that's missing out of this is that one of the pillars of democracy is an informed and knowledgeable population.
Yes.
Now, kind of hinted here and there, but you haven't said what the way you might think about that.
No, I think I've tried to articulate it here in terms of engaging people and people turning from passive consumers to active citizens. That's the sort of way that's the sort of language I use.
It does require knowledge.
Chris, could I just say something here? It was said to me, I was asked on Radio Bristol the other night, well, you've got no money and you've got no candidates, so what are you doing? Well, the answer is, we have to start at the beginning. This is the beginning. You are at the beginning. And many of the things that we want to hear from you are to help us shape how we move on from here. Yes, we've got very little time. We need to get some candidates in place next month and have them already in place in their ward by then. But we have to start at the beginning, and we do want you to be a part of that pioneering element of it. So please don't think, we obviously want to look prepared. We want to look like we know what we're doing. But the reality is there are lots of things that we don't know. And in a sense, we don't want to be know-alls. We want you to be a part of this if you're willing to come on this trip with us.
Right.
Yeah.
You have covered the strategy, selection, support. And most political parties would have that infrastructure for the candidates. But they would also have a process after they get elected. And you're not mentioned what process there might be after an independent candidate gets elected. Because clearly, once you support someone, you can ensure that that person is delivering something in line with what the objectives are.
Okay. I think that quite a lot about, I mean, certainly in terms of encouraging new candidates in their role, there's something we could do. But the question, the harder part of that question is how will the new councillors work? And I don't think we yet have the answers to that. Yeah, well, exactly. We've said that much. But the question is, do they form any sort of group? Do they, as Mel and Pippa have indicated, enjoy one another's company and begin to have imaginative ideas together? To some extent, all that is at this stage unformed. And I think it is for us as a city, with a mayor, to work out how that's going to work. But I think whatever, the political culture of this city is changing. You know, with the election of a mayor, something new is possible. And that's great. And it's up to us, I think, to shape that, to shape the possibility.
Broad strategies. That one, which is number one, taking powers away from London. Is that realistic? It's like taking powers away from Brussels. I mean, like that. Can you expand on it?
Well, it's not. I mean, it's not so far-fetched. The Localism Act begins with an admission from national government that they've got too much power and they ought to really devolve some of it back to localities. So there is some willingness to do that. I think with the election of a mayor, this would be very much on their agenda. So it's really a case of, as a city and as a movement, is this something we think would be appropriate? So much, I think, of local government has felt like the strings have been pulled from elsewhere. You know, that they have very little freedom of movement because of the dictates of national government. We need to loosen that up. We need to be responsible for our future. A city, you know, as big as we are, should be able to manage most of its life, for goodness sake. So, anyway, those are my thoughts, rather than necessarily.
Can I be sort of pushy, Chris? Because I realise I'm always frankly time conscious about public meetings. I don't know what you thought you were coming to, but I think we're finishing at 7:30.
Yes, that's all right. Yeah.
I'd like to say, first of all, please fill out the forms that you've got. Secondly, Jason, I don't know what we've done in terms of getting people who we don't have their emails or phone numbers and the likes of those who are willing to get involved. That's on there. Good. Please, please, if you want to be a part of this, don't leave without it. We will have follow-up meetings very quickly. We're seriously short of time. I want one question to you. Are any of you here willing to be a part of that selection panel? Excellent. Well, we'll get back to you. If you put that on the form, we'll let you know. That's really encouraging because I'm surprised. I thought we would discuss a lot more about that tonight because when we sat around together, it's looked terribly complicated, that business of deciding who we're willing to grace with our favour, as you might say. And I'm really grateful. Chris and I here never knew each other at all until about 3 weeks ago. We'd been working in some parallel universe, and we've come together to do this. So, you know, looking at us, we're not way ahead of you at all. You're with us, and I hope those of you here who believe in what we're saying will stay with us and be a really integral part of it. I recognise there are some people here who are just curious. There are some people maybe even from the political parties who are even more curious. But I'm hoping that most of you will leave here thinking, yes, this is really worthwhile. This is exciting. This could even be thrilling. And as I was told, I mean, Pepe here told me how when they go to party conference, they have a party conference, I think, number one agenda is fun.
Just have a party.
Have a party!
A bit more of a party than a conference.
So I think probably we could end it there, can't we,
Can I
Chris?
just make a last remark myself? I'm involved in a number of different community projects across the city, and one of the things that really gives me intense pleasure is the sense of people working together, giving their energy for something they believe in, and that's what I hope will happen here. That this will catch fire, and that people will be willing to give time and energy to this because they sense that it could just work, that it could just change something. And that's what we leave you with tonight. So.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm not standing. Why? Because I'm too old? Because I'm a white middle-class man? No, but seriously, I really feel excited by the idea of my age of helping to facilitate and enable other people to do something as really important as this. And it matters what you said there, Helen. It really matters that we are we present the city with a diverse and interesting set of candidates, wherever they may be.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Last thing, when you've offered to be on the independent panel, when you've written down your email to keep in touch, etc., offered in whatever way you like, there is also a donation box at the back, which might add to our 40
We need
quid.
some money first.
So please.
We really do. Please start it. We will go out and try to lift money from lots of people, but please help us tonight. At least a £5.